So I hope the week was a good week for you. The last couple of classes, we've been moving more into that sense of stillness. We've been looking into that aspect of mind, that stillness or that quietness. Um, we were discussing it in the context of the samatha work that we do, the calm work we do, the concentration work we do, but um, with that being the foundation, with that being the essential foundation, um, then we open up our experience, and we've been looking at that aspect within awareness, that aspect within our experience of quietness, that aspect within our experience of stillness. So we've been talking about that for a couple of weeks. So I really hope that you're able to incorporate that more into your practice, your daily practice. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that this evening. I hope. We'll see. The other thing that we talked about last week was um, noticing, working with those proclivities of mind, those habitual patterns that we all have, and noticing them, but noticing them within the context of that aspect of mind that's quiet, or that aspect of mind that is still, or is more still. Because that's where the work is in uh, our habitual patterns, and learning not to be so reactive to them, being able to know when they're present and to know when they're not present. So hopefully you have a couple of favorites that you've been working with. Last week, I think we talked about that sense of do we do things for ourselves, or do we do things for other people? Are we always trying to please, always thinking about what other people will think of what we are doing, or do we do things more from the perspective of following our own heart? So when we are working with a meditation, when we're working with the breath, and we come to that place of relative stability in the mind, then we turn our attention towards that aspect of awareness itself. And when we turn our attention towards that aspect of awareness itself, um, within that, is there a place? Can you find the place in that experience that is not content, that is just at least the intimation of that knowing itself, of that awareness itself? And when we begin to connect with that or have a sense of that, that's when we are moving in to the stillness. That at that point we are moving in to the quietness. Another way of saying it is that we're not following. We're not following what comes up in the mind. We are bringing our attention back to the awareness itself, back to the knowingness itself. And I've been using the terms quietness and stillness to point in a certain direction, to point to something in our experience. I'm not asking you to create anything. I'm asking you to notice that aspect of your experience. And this is really essential in the practice. And it's really difficult because our minds are so busy. But the freedom comes not from stopping thought, but that sense of lightness or that sense of freedom or liberation comes from seeing that we are not the thought. The being able to rest in that place that is there before the thought comes, while the thought is happening, and after the thought goes. So we've been working with this, we've been talking about this over the last few weeks. So when we go into the sense of quietness, when we go into the sense of stillness, there's an expansiveness that's there. And at different times, you will experience it in different ways. You could call it an openness. You can call it a lack of reactivity. You can call it a stillness or a quietness. But within that experience, there's a sense of expansiveness. Because our experience is no longer one of just being caught up in the object. No longer being caught up in the idea. No longer being caught up in the thought. So we're developing that. Can you feel the expansiveness in this moment as you're sitting here listening? It's simply that aspect of awareness that's not content. And there's an openness to it. And as we move through the day and we develop the capacity to recognize this, then it really does change our relationship to the content. So in the meditation, in the development of the calm, we are now working on that aspect. We have enough concentration now to introduce ourselves to this spacious awareness, to introduce ourselves to this non-clinging awareness, to get familiar with this aspect of ourselves. So the meditation, the daily practice, the formal practice, starts out with the development of the calm, and then turning our attention at some point towards this awareness, towards this open, expansive feeling. One way of doing it is to begin with the body. Just like when we're doing the breath meditation and we're opening up the feeling of bliss or joy in the body. Remember in the Anapanasati, where with the breath, we develop uh, the feeling of piti and sukha in the body. Well, now the idea that we're using is we're developing that sense of openness or spaciousness within the body. Another way you could say it is we are opening to that aspect of our experience that's not constricted by an idea, that's not constricted by form. That's not constricted by activity, that's not constricted by reactivity, that's not defined by, might be a better way of saying it. So, whatever our experiences in the moment, whatever our experiences in whatever we're doing, we're not separate from this sense of openness, this sense of expansiveness. And if we can't find that in the formal practice, we go back to the breath and we go back to the body. In our daily life, if we can't find it, we go back to the breath and we go back to the body. Same process. So it's a training with this. And when we are in a quiet place, when we can develop, when we can connect with that sense of expansiveness, this sense of spaciousness, we rest in it. But another way, or another thing to do with that, is then bring up idea, bring something up in the mind. Look at thought, look at something that you find you bounce off of, or something that you have a reaction to. Like, bring it up. And see the expansiveness in that moment. See the expansiveness in that moment. And the Cole's notes on that is the expansiveness is not the content. So when you bring up something that you react to, the reaction may still be there. When you have a flurry of thoughts, the flurry of thoughts will still be there. But so will the expansiveness. So will that sense of openness. So will that sense of spaciousness. So the meditation, opening up to non-clinging awareness, opening up to that sense of spaciousness, that sense of expansiveness, resting in that. And then when something comes up, or we can bring something up, and we look at the expansiveness, the spaciousness in that moment. So we recognize that when the mind is moving, when the mind is busy, 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 and when the mind is not busy. And we contemplate it. We contemplate it. The purpose of this practice, the purpose of what the Buddha taught is to understand the nature of our experience, the nature of our reality in a very deep way. And how do we come to that? We look at our experience. We look at the face of our experience. And when we look, we realize all of this content that we run after is not us. So, this resting in this spacious awareness, this resting in this expansiveness, is really, in some ways, the gateway. This is where we learn to rest. This is where we learn to sit. This is where we learn to be. And from that place where our experience is no longer confined to definition, we allow something else to come through. This spacious awareness is an indicator, is the doorway to this deeper experience of ourselves. So, whatever the experience is, whatever your experience is in this moment, we just rest in this sense of awareness. We just rest in this sense of openness. So back to our proclivities, where we spend most of our time, our habitual thought patterns. So how does all of what I've been talking about apply to that? Because maybe it just seems like a bunch of ideas or words to you. How does all this apply to that? Maybe you're not a very good meditator. Maybe you can't find calm. Maybe your life is too busy. Maybe you understand what I'm saying, you've experienced what I'm saying, but you can't be with that now. Maybe you're just the one person in the group that will never get it. Maybe that's you. Everybody else seems to get it except me. I'm looking on this screen, everybody seems to completely understand what Jack's talking about, except for me. The only place that we find this is in our experience. So we just keep looking again and again at our experience. The samadhi helps, the meditation helps, but really it's bringing awareness to our experience, to our daily experiences, bringing awareness to what the mind is doing at any point in time. And if you do, if you look, if you look, you will see this openness. You will see the spaciousness. But if we're clinging too tightly, if we're clinging too tightly to everything that happens, if we're clinging too tightly to our definition of who we are, if we're clinging too tightly to our definition of who they are, then there's no room. Then it's really hard to see. But we look, we make that the point of our day, investigating our experience and seeing what's there outside of the definitions that we always use. We're simply looking at experience. We're looking at a cup. We're looking at a cup. I'm looking at this cup. But what's my experience? What's your experience when you're looking at the cup? Is the cup the only thing you see? There's awareness, isn't there? And the cup goes away. There's awareness, isn't there? This is the openness. This is the spaciousness. This is the cup. This is the openness. This is the spaciousness. This is the cup. This is the openness. This is the spaciousness. This is the openness. This is the spaciousness. This is the openness. This is the spaciousness. And then somebody says, could you hand me the cup, please? And you go, yes, here's the cup. Daily life goes on. Content of mind goes on. We function in the world. Spaciousness, activity. Spaciousness, activity. Spaciousness and activity. They're the same thing, happening at the same time. But we've learned to recognize this. We've learned to recognize this. So what's ever happening in this, whatever it's happening in this, there's a toonie. Some money comes your way. Don't get too attached because we know what happens, right? It goes away. Dang. But this is still here. Good, the bad, the good, the bad, but this is still here. So what does that mean? Hmm? What does that mean to your life? Of course, now I'm sitting here thinking, I hope I can find that toonie after the class. Because I just threw it behind me, it could be anywhere. It's pretty messy back there. There's a lot of things, aren't there? There's a lot of things back there, aren't there? A lot. But this is what we're training in.